So I don't know about you, but life's hard, isn't it? Do you ever feel like you need a boost? I remember back to the 80s, and the high point of the advertising industry was the Ready Brek glow. Do you remember that? Some of you from back in the 80s, others of you are far too young, YouTube it later. This perfect advert that it was just the thing that would get all mums rushing out to the supermarket to buy Ready Brek. Because they put this advert together where if you ate that cereal, do you remember it, Michelle? When you ate that cereal, what happened to you? Can you remember? You glow. There was like this force field of light around you. And people rushed out to buy it because they really did believe that if you ate Ready Brek, you'd be able to face the day a stronger, more capable, more boosted person. And I think we're always looking for that little edge, that little thing that will get us ahead. I know that I'm looking for that. You know that you're looking for that. Because when I slow down, and I think particularly spiritually, I think to myself, why is my faith so meagre? Why is it that spiritual things seem so distant and I so often feel lost? Yes, I come along. Yes, I try to open my Bible, but sometimes it's like wading through concrete that has set. What is it that will give me that little glow, that little step ahead? What kind of things need to happen to me for that to break into my life? I've just read from the Bible this example of shocking, bold faith. How can I have a little bit of that? Where can I go buy it? What needs to happen for that to break into my life? Maybe you feel like that's the same for us as a church together. Isn't it hard sometimes? And there is good strength in the regular. And so we keep on doing the regular discipline things, don't we? But I don't know, sometimes it feels like the faith and the hope that I know I'm supposed to be energized by, that's supposed to push me out into the day, feels that little bit elusive. Well, today we're going to get a little bit of help with that. Do you want that? Please be praying for that. Be praying for that right now. I so often find as I've been digging around in this text and meditating on it through the week, I feel like I've been bouncing off it and I've been on the verge of it and I just want it to come and sink in. So be asking for that. And there's two things that pop out and they're dead easy. Even I can remember these two. You won't even need to make notes on this. They're that easy to remember. Okay, there's two things that transform people from sort of no glow to being boosted to bold, adventurous faith. And there are two things of this: a crumb and a word. Can you remember that? A crumb and a word. Let's see them. Let's have a look at this first thing. A crumb, okay? Look at verse 24. Jesus, who you'll remember has just been moving forward, taking this kingdom, this renewed life of God, breaking in and making all things new. He has been going all around the Galilean hillsides, and people have been flocking to him for all manner of reasons, and now it's holiday time. Some of you are planning your Easter break. They went to the area of Tyre, which is probably about 50 miles north. They went north of the border. And he went there with his disciples to train them. But even up there in Tyre, which wasn't a Jewish area, even up there they have felt the vibrations and the reverberations of the power and authority of Jesus breaking out. Look there at verse 24. Jesus left that place, went up to the vicinity of Tyre, which was, as we'll find out in a minute, enemy-occupied territory. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it. Have you ever been like that? Shut the door. I need to chat to my disciples. Anthony's there and he's going, amen. High maintenance people. That's just his wife. Okay, he's shut the door, put on the iPad. Okay, they're up there. Interestingly, Jesus went there, by the way. That'll come important in a second. And up they go. Yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman. Okay? So they're sitting round. They're cracking open the bread and the wine. They're kicking back. They're chilling. The disciples are all there. James is skitting his younger brother John. Probably Thomas is doubting something. Jesus is enjoying a bit. And the door flies open and an exasperated woman is there. And she's got a look at... But you don't do that kind of thing. We know four things about this person who has just burst into the room, making an intrusion. Number one, she's a woman. Women don't approach men unless they're after something. And I'm not talking about the time of day. In that culture, that's not what would happen. She's a woman. What else do we know about her? She has a daughter. We don't know about dad, but we know she has a daughter who has an unclean spirit. This was a pagan-dominated area. It was away from the cleanness of the religion of down in Jerusalem. And we don't know the backstory, but there is some sort of demonic oppression going on here. Who knows? Perhaps it was because she was a casualty of the occult. Perhaps it was the mum who had brought this on. We don't know. But one thing we do know is that as she walked in the door and that news became apparent, the disciples would have sneered at her and said, well, yeah, of course there's somebody like you. What did you expect? You're a bad mum. She's a Greek. Now what that means is not just ethnicity. That's almost a different religion. The Greek faith was based, or Greek assumptions and intellect was based on a whole stack of different religious and ideological viewpoints. It was almost as if saying she's a totally different religion. It was as if a Muslim had just broken into a Christian church. What are you doing here? You don't fit our kind, thank you very much. And she was a Syrophoenician. Now, that's hard enough for me to say, but it means that they were an enemy. You see, it's the area where Jezebel, do you remember Jezebel, that wicked witch queen from the Old Testament? It's where she came from. It was almost like Al-Qaeda. Because if you were a Syrophoenician, in times of famine, you would trot down to Israel and do a raid, and you would literally take the bread off the table of the people who were Jewish. You hated them. So the disciples look at her, she's bursting, she's looking flustered, she's looking desperate. They snitch, she's from Tyre. Get out! We ain't touching you with a barge pole. All of them have got those judging, sneering eyes on, except one person in the room. Who's that? And Jesus has a gentle smile. And I love what happens here. Because this woman, in Jesus' eyes, is putting a lot of people to shame. Look at it, verse 26. Can you see it there? The woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her. She came, trembling, falling at the feet of Jesus and saying, I need you. Who's she put to shame by doing that? Well, if let me catch you up if you've missed the earlier part of the story. The Jewish leaders who were waiting for a hope from God to come, when Jesus came, did they spot him? No, they pushed him away as far as they could. What's up, Emily? Hurry up. So here were these self-sufficient, smug Jewish authorities. They should have come and fallen at Jesus' feet. Did they do that? No, they were blind, as we learnt from last week, because of the uncleanness of their heart. They didn't realise how much they needed Jesus. This woman does. What about the disciples? They're constantly being fooled by the power of Jesus. They should have spotted it. I mean, we sat talking about this in our fellowship group the other night. How could they not see? He's walked on water. He's fed 5,000. He's calmed the storm. It's like, duh, who do you think he is? But none of them have fallen at his feet and begged him. I think she shames us as well. We're every day of our life looking for something to help us make sense of the struggle. To help us when evil seems to invade from the outside and evil seems to overflow from the inside. And here she comes. She doesn't stand on ceremony. She doesn't stand up to social convention. She doesn't care what people think. She throws open the door. She pushes her way through, elbows up. Get me to Jesus. And whilst the disciples look at her and sneer and say, get out, we ain't touching you with a barge pole, Jesus says this thing that, if you're not careful, it sounds misogynistic and racist, but it ain't. He has a laugh with her. Look at what he says. Can you see that in this next bit? Or let me actually, before I tell you I ought to tell you what we did this morning. We went out for breakfast. It's Mother's Day. So where's that woman of mine? Don't you stand up behind that piano complaining. It cost me £36.97 this morning. Some people would be happy with that. But we're in the Premier Inn having this posh breakfast, got all the girls sitting around, and suddenly you smell it. There's this mangy dog. And of course, the doors in the Premier Inn, they'll let anybody in, and this dog that is covered in muck trots up to us at the table. I'm sitting at one end, Poppy's filling her face with beans, and the dog it stinks. And it just looks at me, sits down, and just goes, I'm like, who the monkeys is this dog? And the dog just sits there, expecting to be fed. I mean, what right has that dog got to be there? Any right at all? Alma's going, I ain't going to the Premier Inn. Now, we did go to the Premier Inn for breakfast, but there was no dog. Look what Jesus says. Can you see it there? First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to their... Okay, a dog trots into your house, bold as brass, and demands to be fed. What do you do? Now, some of you might be kind-hearted, but one thing is absolutely clear, that dog has no right and no claim to anything in your house, because it's not your dog. Do you get that? And Jesus, with us, I'd love to see, he would have just been he's beckoning her out. He's playing with her. He's giving her he's drawing her. He's saying, listen, I'm going to tell you stuff, love, that you already know. That you are not a Jewish person, that you are an enemy, that you are a pagan worshipper, that you're of another religion. You got no right banging on this door, and you're trotting up to my table wanting to be fed. You ain't got no claim, have you? And I reckon there would have just been a little turn in the corner of his mouth. And all the disciples are like, yeah, kick her out. Get shut. You tell her, Jesus. And in that moment, this woman, it's a little bit like, let me just say, it's a little bit like when Amy comes up yet again asking for more money to go out with her mates for the umpteenth time when she hasn't tidied her bedroom and she's been pulling her sister's hair and she's doing all kinds, and then she has that judging look on her face, just like now, going, what? And she goes, have some money. And I look at her and go, you cheeky little monkey. I use an image as to what it's like for that to happen. And this woman does something amazing. For the first time in the whole of the gospel stories, this woman jumps into a parable that Jesus has spoken. Nobody else in the gospel, they've all heard parables, but they've all gone, that's not me, I don't need that. And she jumps straight into it and she owns it. She says, you're damn right, that's me. In fact, look, you can see it there. Yes, Lord, she replied, but even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. I absolutely love this. What could have been an incredibly awkward moment. And suddenly she's there, disciples are cheering, get her out. And that half sentence makes the Lord of the universe go weak at the knees. He is a sucker for people who come humbly. She didn't kick up a stink and say, I've got a claim. She just goes, do you know what? You're right, I've got no claim to you, Jesus. But just a crumb from you will be more than enough of what I need. Maybe she'd heard the story that we heard a couple of weeks ago at the feeding of the 5,000, and the 5 loaves and the 2 fish get multiplied out to feed, 5,000 men, probably somewhere 20 to 40,000 people. How many basketfuls left over? Went round picking up the crumbs. And she's heard about this and she goes, if it's one of your crumbs, Jesus, that is more than a feast in the palace. And if I could just have that, Lord, just give me that. I know I'm a dog. I know I've got no claim, but could you at least give this little old dog a bone? She's so humble. She's the opposite of the Pharisees who came with their smugness and wouldn't admit their need. She's the opposite of the disciples who are spiritually dull and haven't got a clue who's sitting in front of them. She's alive to the power of God wanting to work in that area that was an enemy-occupied territory. And she says, yeah, that's me. And in front of the dozy disciples, Jesus looks at her and goes, go ahead, girl, that's what I'm looking for. That's the right way to respond to who I am. She doesn't come with excuses. She doesn't say, oh, it's my upbringing, I've had such a horrible thing. Oh, my deadbeat husband, he's a loser, or I've been trying my best. Oh, the job market is really hard at the moment. I should have a hand. No, doesn't come with entitlement. I'm owed, we're so entitled. We talk about having a claim. We kick up a stink if we have to wait more than 2 hours in the doctor's surgery. We expect when we make stupid mistakes that somebody else will bail us out. We may have certain claims in the world's court, but before God, we have no claim. None at all. Nothing. And she gets this. Do you realise that if you have anything good in your life right now, it's not because you've earned it or deserved it or because God owes you? I'm amazed at this. I've got so much good stuff in my life. None of it do I deserve. It's all been a gift of God. And more than anything, I've got the salvation of my soul through Jesus Christ our Lord. And she comes and says, I need some of that. She doesn't come to him with a promise of being better. Some of you do, don't you? Oh, Lord, do this and I promise I'll change. She just comes and says, give us a crumb, love. I just need a crumb. Because if it's a crumb from you, it will do. So she breaks down these barriers. She just comes to Jesus desperate. I'm stuffed without him. I'm powerless as this evil assails me. And can I tell you that the Lord of the universe, Jesus Christ, the one we preach in this church week in and week out, is an absolute sucker for people who come like that. What about you? Have you come here to be like that before Jesus today? Woe betide us if we try to come before Jesus in any way other than that. Pharisees tried and they looked fools. The disciples are dull. Just come like this woman. Just come like this woman. In verse 29 there, then he told her, for such a reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter. What a beautiful picture of the kingdom. The disciples needed to see this. They thought it was all going to be for them. They needed to see this grace. When she had no claim, no right, he gives. Now, can I tell you, I've been reflecting on that this week. I'm so glad about that. I don't know about you, but so many domains of my life feel like hard work. Do yours? So many things just feel hard. There's one area, the most important area, I don't have to work. I can roll up to the Lord every day and just go, thank you that you give and I don't have to earn and do. That's what it means to live in grace. Are you thankful for that today? You can tell something about people. You can tell what they love the most by what they talk about the most. Have you noticed this? I hate to think what my girls will say about me. I sort of know what it is, but we'll talk about that later, okay? What is it that Jesus talks about all the time? What is it he demonstrates by his living? That he welcomes people who've got no claim on him and he gives them abundantly. He gives grace. What is the most important thing to the living God of the Bible? Grace. Disciples, watch and learn. You're going to go out and preach grace to needy, hungry souls. And if you doubt that, look at the cross that will come very soon in this gospel. Because there at the cross, we see the ability of humankind to try to destroy its creator, kill God. And at the same time, we see the willingness of that same creator, Jesus Christ, stepping into space-time history to die for those who would seek to kill him. That's our God. The disciples, did they need a lesson in grace that day? Of course they did. But they needed a lesson as well to see who this was for. It was for the ends of the earth. And it's been trundling through all the way through the Bible up to this point that God is going to go global. He wants the unreached people who are beyond the borders, north of the border, to receive that grace. Disciples, don't you dare keep it in the gang near you with people who are like you and people you find easy to get on with and people who've only ever been nice to you. You get that gospel out there. This is what you're going to do, disciples, because Jesus is going international to the nations, and Speak Baptist Church is both a proof and a promise of that. Because we're a long, long way from Tyre today, aren't we? But we're here crying out to Jesus for mercy. And we're saying, Lord, use us as the next stepping stone to reach the people who you want to reach. And look at the outcome in verse 30. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. That's what one crumb will do. He didn't even need to be there. He has got such an authoritative voice that when he speaks it, it will happen. And nobody can get in the way of that. Now, I realise that this whole story is a bit unusual, and I want to be honest with you and say, in all my years of ministry, I've never experienced a demon-possessed, unclean spirit-influenced young girl. I haven't. And I suspect that that's probably because this kind of thing is more common in areas of the world where the occult practices and pagan practices are more pronounced and more rife and more common in community. I think the enemy of our souls goes dark in an area which is secular like ours. He says, why awaken people to spiritual realities when I can keep it quiet? Yet I have seen plenty of daughters who are spiritually disturbed, caught in evil, with desperate mums watching on with tears in their eyes as those little ones who they love have given themselves to pagan practices like violence and sexual immorality and self-harm. Now, we don't know this mum's track record, but we suspect it probably wasn't great. But in this story, this mum goes from being a bad mum to the best mum. Why? What does she do? What does she do when she sees her little one trapped, volunteering herself to a slavery, held? Oh, no doubt she tried to get along with practical advice and more support and love and encouragement, but what does she actually do? She goes and takes her daughter's need to who? Jesus. Now, mums, it's Mother's Day. And we love you. But I don't know a single woman in this room who is the mother they wish they were. And can I tell you, that's a good thing to have a high and lofty view. If you want to move from being the mother you are to being the best mum, do you know what you need to do? Urgently and earnestly be the mum, same goes for dads, that takes your kids' needs to Jesus. Because ultimately, every one of our kids' needs is always more spiritual than it ever is anything else. Take your kids' needs to Jesus on Mothering Sunday and every day of the year. I said there were two things. First of all, there's a crumb, and much more quickly, this is the other thing you need. It's a word. And as usual in Mark's Gospel, things are moving on at pace. Can you see it there at verse 31? Then Jesus left the vicinity of Tyre, which is way up in the north, and went through Sidon, which is more looped up down there, down to the Sea of Galilee, which is sort of like home turf and territory, and into the region of the Decapolis, which once again, we'd been there before. Do you remember? It was in chapter 5. Jesus cast out some demons from that guy called Legion, and as soon as Jesus had set the guy free from evil oppression, all the crowds around said what to him? What did they say? We love you, come and live with us and help us be set free. Is that what they said? What did they say? Do you remember? Go on, Weston. Matty. Get lost. Go away. I mean, isn't that amazing? The power of God is setting people free, and they want him as far away as possible. But that's not what happens here. Look at this. Something has changed, and we don't know what's changed, but something has. Verse 32. There, some people brought to him a man who was deaf and could hardly talk, and they begged Jesus to place his hands on this man. Now, barely talk, it's the idea of having a speech impediment. So the likelihood is this man who was born able to hear, learnt a bit of speech, and then for some reason, whether an accident or an illness or some reason we don't know, he'd lost his ability to hear. Now, can you imagine how crushing that is? You see, blindness cuts you off from things, and it's horrible. But deafness cuts you off from people. There's something about us in our humanity that means we want to be known, to be able to communicate something of who we are deep inside. But if you can't hear, and your words can't come out, and you can't even hear somebody say, I love you. Maybe he had heard that and loved it from when he was a kid, and that has been lost to him forever, seemingly. This is brokenness at work. But then suddenly things start to get a bit weird. Look at verse 33. After he took him aside, now at this point you want to be saying, why bother? Why does he take him aside? Let's remember the amount of power that we've seen that Jesus has had over everything, whether it is disease, whether it's the demonic, whether it is death, whether it's storms, whether it's insufficiency, whatever it is, the power of surface tension in water, he commands it all. And so what he could have done at this point is he could have just gone, here you go, region of the Decapolis. And everything that was bust gets fixed in a second. But what does he do with this guy? He takes him aside away from the crowd. It's easy to think that because you're sitting in a crowd right now, the living God deals with crowds and not individuals. He does deal with crowds. It's easy to think, and I was sitting chatting to a Christian brother not so long ago who sort of said, I view God as almost, he's in charge, but he's a bit like the Prime Minister who rolls up and speaks from a platform, but I've got no personal interaction with whatsoever. I'm sorry, you won't be able to get that idea from looking here, will you? Look at what happens. It's incredibly intimate, and I'm about to make you feel quite uncomfortable. It's really, really awkward. He takes him aside, and he does, I'd like you to do this to the person next to you. Would you turn to the person next to you and put your finger in their ears? Okay, now get a bit of your spit and put it on their tongue. Okay. Is that horrible or what? Any germaphobes here? What is he doing? Is it some kind of... So look at Kaylee, she's loving it. She's loving it. I know you're never going to get your fingers in ears that big. Honestly, there you go. Okay. What's going on here? Now, this isn't some sort of ancient incantation. To somebody who can't hear and can't speak, Jesus comes along to this guy and does like an ancient version of sign language. He uses his fingers and even his spit to say, I'm about to do something in your life because you haven't got a clue what's going on, have you, mate? Because you can't hear it. And he shows personally this beautiful thing. It's as if Jesus comes to him and says, I'm about to bring life into your ears. I'm about to bring life onto your tongue. I'm about to bring life actually into you because I'm going to come into you. I'm about to invade your deadness with the life that only I can bring. You will come alive in the ways and places where you were dead. So Jesus communicates that to him, and then he speaks that almost impronounceable word. Okay? Anybody want to have a go at it? That's close enough. Ephrathah. Okay? If in doubt, just go, okay? And he speaks this word to say, be open, which is very interesting because it only ever turns up in one other place in the Bible, and I'm going to come to that in just a second. Okay, this idea of being opened up. Where was I? And that's what he does. He just speaks that one word, be opened, and life floods into this guy. There was sound. In fact, it's an incredibly powerful image, isn't it? It's almost as if look what the words that it says afterwards. At this, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosed, and began to speak plainly. It's almost like the picture of a prison here. Can you see that? It's almost as if this guy's his ears, somebody put a padlock on. But for Jesus, it's as easy as just unpopping a padlock and open. It's almost as if his tongue had been chained and held fast. And now the chain just gets snapped because Jesus is there and his tongue is loosened and he began to speak plainly. Jesus does this with just one word. But if we were to turn back in our Bible to Isaiah 35, please chase it later, listen to this. This was the expectation of the nation of Israel, that a day would come when God himself would come and make all things new. The desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it, and the splendor of Carmel and Sharon. They will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Strengthen the feeble hands. Steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong and do not fear. Your God will come. He will come with vengeance, with divine retribution. He will come to save you. Then he will, don't miss this bit, then will the eyes of the blind be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer and the mute tongue shout for joy. What's happening in this Decapolis region? Well, it's what has been promised for a long time. That those who are deaf and mute, those who are spiritually deaf and mute, which is all of us left to our own selves, a miracle is being done with one word from Jesus. The deaf can hear and their tongues are loosed to sing praise. Look at the outcome, verse 36 and 37. Jesus commanded them not to tell anyone. But the more he did so, the more they kept talking about it. People were overwhelmed with amazement. He has done everything well, they said. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. Can you believe that? Sometimes it can feel like we're overrun with a world that is the opposite of Isaiah 35. Don't you feel like that? Trapped in judgment, nothing good, always confounded by our own brokenness. But Jesus has arrived and said, my kingdom is coming and I'm setting you free. Oh, that ultimate day is coming. But in the meantime, one person at a time, one life at a time, one challenge at a time, Jesus is opening our ears and loosening our tongue and equipping us to live for him in this world. Now, he opened your deaf ears if you're a believer here today. He did a miracle in your heart. Have you thanked him for it today? Have you said, thank you, Lord, for that intimate and personal touch? Not for us generally, but if you're a believer here today, for you personally. Why he would do it for me, I've got no idea, but he did. Hallelujah. He opened my deaf ears to the news of this new kingdom, and for your edification, loosed my tongue to speak. And he loosed your tongue to speak. And if he can do it in the Decapolis, these out-of-the-way junk people, just think of the person who it is most unlikely will ever want to hear the words of Jesus with gladness. Is it somebody who's coming along to Rooted on Wednesday nights? Is it one of the stubborn old dears who don't want to hear about Jesus on a Monday? Is it your next door neighbour or one of your kids? Who is it who's the most antagonistic? With one word from Jesus, well, you know what could happen. Isn't that right, Alma? Are you one of those stubborn old goats on a Monday? No, oh, good on you. Good on you. You see, the Lord, if you get a touch from him and a word from him, he will open your ears and he will loose your mouths because you're going to want to hear. You're going to want to hear. And there'll be nothing you can do about it. Who is it that you know who you've been praying for and perhaps you've given up on speaking? Isn't it wonderful here? Because I lack the ability to know how to come alongside somebody. I don't know what to do. But Jesus did with this guy. So what I can't do, he will do. So if he has bought you a crumb and renewed you, sing hallelujah. Sing about him being the Word who comes from God the Father and makes all things new. If he has opened your deaf ears to sing and declare his praise, don't we want that praise to resound from our mouths, in our homes, in our places of work, and in this area of speak? That's what Jesus was showing the disciples. It can go anywhere. All we need today is a crumb and a word. We take them in, and then we sing and speak them out. And with that in mind, we're going to do that now. Let's sing together.